Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to the real reason Japan attacked Pearl Harbor from Johnny Harris. This video was just posted, so I mean, yeah, I'm onto this quick. But I've done reactions to Pearl Harbor before. Was it from the channel Montayama? Basically it's like the bird's eye view of like everything happening, and yeah, I know the details of it, but this says the real reason. So are we being lied to? I'm kind of joking, but is this sort of what this video is hinting at? I don't know, but we're going to check this out. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. Hopefully you're doing well. Links are in the description to my Patreon where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube, films, TV series, all that stuff. Links are there for those who want to see that. But let's check this out.
It is no joke, it is the real war. It has been a very severe attack.
This region, the Pacific, recently it's heating up. And now is probably a good time to rewind and remember what this region looked like back when there was a war happening out here on these islands, a war between great powers. Let's start right here, at the end of the 1800s, when Japan is expanding fast. Conquering territory, taking the resources, becoming a powerful empire. By 1940, their empire looks like this. It includes hundreds of remote islands out here in the Pacific, and Japan uses these colonies to extract resources that fed this growing conquest. But they don't have everything they need yet. They still rely on the US for the most vital of resources, oil and metal. Now the US doesn't necessarily like how aggressive Japan is being in their region, but they tolerate it.
Well, Japan's sort of doing what I guess China, or they're thinking China are going to do soon. Or maybe they've also done before as well, but was that sort of how Japan was seen? I guess that's how it's sort of coming across, because China with Taiwan and not Singapore, is it Hong Kong? I think Hong Kong, like they're just basically trying to reclaim them or claim them and take them over and all that sort of stuff. I assume it's somewhat relative, maybe a bit more extreme in these times, but
that is until Japan allies itself with Nazi Germany, and then continues its expansion into a French colony and threatens to completely cut off the US from its ally China. So the US, along with Britain and the Netherlands, cut Japan off of oil, gas, iron, and steel. These are vital resources, so this is a major blow to Japan. They calculate that they only have 2 more years before they run out of this vital energy. They must act quickly, so they start looking further south, to land that is known to have a lot of oil. The problem for Japan is that this is all controlled by European empires. Japan makes a plan to kick out all of these Europeans and establish their own.
oh, so this is actually how they got involved. Like, I didn't know this is what caused it. The fact that the Europeans, and I guess the US and Australia, owned these or had control, so they saw it as an opportunity. I was like, oh well, we need this land to get the oil, so it's over oil. Flipping hell, man! Japan got into the World War because of oil.
Access to oil and metal, so they aren't
Flipping
reliant
hell.
on outsiders.
The world hasn't changed. That's just something that's very clear.
And they sell this ambitious plan to their people by saying that they actually want to liberate Asia from European domination.
It's a good
So, in
selling,
December 1941, they initiate this plan,
sales pitch.
sending ships and planes to drop bombs all over the region that they want to conquer. And to stop the Americans from coming to the Europeans' rescue, Japan has already sent a large chunk of its navy to surprise the Americans by bombing their navy in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It was their first step for kicking off this larger offensive. The attacks on Pearl Harbor and all over Asia were a huge, bold, and risky move for Japan. No one thought they would do it. It came as a massive surprise, and as a result, it was incredibly successful for Japan's goals. The US and its allies are now at war, but beating back Japan will not be easy. Japan has a powerful navy, and not only is America's Pacific fleet severely damaged because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, but around this same time, Hitler has taken the moment to declare war on the US, dragging them into the European theater of World War II. Over the next 7 months, Japan takes even more territory.
Powerful and resourceful gangsters have banded together to make war upon the whole human race. Their challenge has now been flung at the United States of America. Together with other free peoples, we are now fighting to maintain our right to live among our world neighbors in freedom, in common decency, without fear of assault. We are now in this war.
The US has to surrender the Philippines, its foothold in the Pacific, and Japan forces capture and kill tens of thousands of American and Filipino troops in just one of what would become many horrific war crimes they commit during this war. By the middle of 1942, Japan has achieved its goals of kicking out European empires and securing for itself a massive empire full of resources. They're now self-sufficient, and they're growing. And they're not done. They're drunk on all of this success, and some military leaders want to keep pushing east, all the way to here, which would cut the US off from its big ally Australia. So they set their sights on this American base, located on a small atoll called Midway. If they could take Midway, the US would be so weak, Japan calculates, that they would be forced to settle this conflict, leaving Japan with all of this newly conquered territory.
Damn.
Alas, that's not what happened.
No.
In May of 1942, Japan sends a massive fleet of hundreds of planes, accompanied by battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines, as well as 4 of their precious aircraft carriers. Now remember, this is World War II, and you can't really fight a war out here in the ocean without aircraft carriers, which enabled Japan's planes to land and refuel while fighting deep out in this ocean. Aircraft carriers are vital, so Japan is preparing to conquer Midway. But what they don't know is that American codebreakers in Hawaii have cracked Japan's encrypted communication and are aware of their battle plans days before the attack. This makes all the difference, and in a 4-day battle, the US defeats Japan's navy at Midway, destroying all 4 of their precious aircraft carriers in the process.
The odds looked impossible, but when it was all over, the Japanese had suffered their greatest naval defeat in
Look
history.
at that. Imagine being on board that. Fuck.
It's a huge blow
No
to Japan's
way.
momentum, and from here, the US and its allies start to turn the tide on this war in the Pacific. Hey, I know we're talking about World War II, but I just want to pause really quick for a message from our sponsors. We can't make journalism and
He's got the
history stories
cashola.
like this without sponsors. So thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring today's.
Oh, it's BetterHelp. I saw the comments in this video. People are saying they're scammers, and I do remember watching YouTube before. They had things that happened. I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but he's getting his money. Respect to him for that. But yeah. That's it. I saw the comments, so we'll skip that.
Sponsoring today's video, let's dive back into this map of World War II. So here's a problem for both sides. Distance. It's sort of hard to fathom the distances out here. Like, you could fit the mainland United States in just one small part of the Japanese Empire. And remember that the US military has to travel thousands of kilometers just to get here. Distance is also a problem for Japan, who, yes, just conquered all of this territory, but that means that it now has to ship resources back to the mainland. It has to get men, doctors, food, and supplies out to all of this land thousands of kilometers away, creating brand new supply routes. We found this old Japanese map drawn up during the war that shows all of these colonies shaded with a red marker and showing this dizzying web of supply lines needed to keep the war going. This was a logistical nightmare for Japan, but it was also a key vulnerability that the US would exploit in this conflict. So the US begins cutting into the Japanese Empire. It's off to a slow start, but eventually they settle onto a strategy of targeting certain islands, not the ones that were the most fortified, but the ones that would get them one step closer to the Japanese mainland, but also give them proximity to these supply lines, the supply lines that keep Japan's war machine running. The US starts conquering these lesser fortified islands and using them to target the ships that carry food and weapons and supplies throughout the Japanese Empire. I found this data set that shows every merchant vessel that the US and its allies sunk during these years.
It's crazy how it's all been tracked. This is years ago.
It's a lot. American submarines alone would go on to sink 5 million tons of Japanese...
Oh, I was going to say 5 million ships. I was about to say, what the fuck? 5 million tons, though, still crazy.
Shipping and naval vessels. This would go on to sink 5 million tons of Japanese shipping and naval vessels. This strategy of targeting the supply lines was a game changer for the US, allowing them to weaken the Japanese Empire by targeting its cargo, like they did down here in this key Japanese military stronghold in the south of the empire. The US and its allies first conquered nearby islands, and then used these islands as a jumping off point to target the supply lines. But instead of mounting an attack on this stronghold, the US focused on the supply ships that were bringing food, ammunition, reinforcements, and medical supplies to this stronghold. This left tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers stranded to die of starvation and disease. The US was able to take out a key Japanese base without having to fight a battle. The island hopping strategy was really working. And if you look closely at this map, you'll see that it allowed the US to bypass these heavily fortified Japanese islands, focusing more on cutting them off than trying to conquer them, while also getting the US closer and closer to the mainland. As 1945 rolls around, the US continues to beat Japan back. The two US forces converge to retake the Philippines. All these newly captured islands allow the US to deploy their new high-tech plane, the B-29 bomber.
Oh, okay.
This thing could fly super high.
I feel like I've done a reaction to this plane alone probably about a year or two ago, probably like 2 years ago. This was the boy, wasn't it? This was like this. I'm not gonna say it won the war, but it was a very important thing.
And deep into the Japanese mainland, and dropped 20,000 pounds worth of bombs. Japan is clearly losing by now, so they start to resort to more brutal tactics, like having their pilots fly their planes into US ships in suicide attacks, a deadly tactic that not only led to immense damage to the US Navy, but also had a psychological element, a realization that the enemy was willing to go to great lengths to fight back. But even so, Japan's empire continued to shrink, almost as quickly as it had expanded. But the closer the US gets to the mainland, the more brutal the fighting is becoming. For a variety of reasons, there's really only one path to invade the mainland. You have to hop along this southern island chain and invade from the south. So the US sets their sights on perhaps the most important island in the Pacific, Okinawa. Japan knows that the US is coming for Okinawa, so they recruit around 40,000 local men, giving some of them only spears to defend themselves.
Spears? This is World War II. I mean, I know the weapons aren't like what we have now, but flipping hell, they gave them spears.
Together with the army, they dig tunnels and caves and trenches and bunkers. The army gives out hand grenades to civilians, telling them to commit suicide instead of surrender, warning them that the Americans will be brutal and violent to anyone they capture. Japan wants
They brainwashed them, but I mean, I guess at this point they're doing anything they can to survive, like the party in charge or the people in charge.
Battle to convince the Americans that invading the mainland is a bad idea. It's their last-ditch effort to avoid defeat. The US hits the beach at Okinawa, starting one of the bloodiest battles of the entire war. 82 days of violence that leaves a third of the population dead. A total of around 100,000 Japanese.
A third? Mate. A third of the population. So, realistically, like, everyone will have known someone who was killed. Fuck yeah. I mean, that's not a surprise based off that stat, but flipping hell, man.
In addition to 12,000 American soldiers. 1,000 Japanese, that leaves a third of the population dead. A total of around 100,000 Japanese in addition to 12,000 American soldiers.
Damn. We don't, like, in the UK, we didn't learn about this at all. I mean, I guess because the UK wasn't involved, but it's a World War battle. I've never heard of, I guess, the Battle of Okinawa or this stuff. Like, that is insane. The loss of life in that time frame.
And the US wins. They now control the most valuable island of them all, the island that will enable them to invade the mainland. But they're also left with a horrifying clarity of how serious Japan is about not surrendering, about fighting until the very end. Invading the mainland will be costly. Meanwhile, in Europe, Hitler and his allies have been defeated. The winners get together and issue a statement to Japan. unconditional surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. Now that Hitler is defeated, the Soviet Union is also preparing to join the US to deal the final blow to Japan.
That's wild to think about, man. The Soviet Union is thinking to join the US. Is that an alternate in a different world, right? Like, bro, the US and the Soviet Union are still kicking. They're best buddies here. They're probably controlling the world whilst the rest of the world just rots and suffers, you know. Crazy.
Japan. But Japan doesn't reply to the demand for surrender, and the Allies see this as a rejection.
God damn it.
Back in the US, in the deserts of the Southwest, the US has just successfully tested an atomic bomb. So now they have a decision to make. They either continue their momentum and invade the mainland of Japan and face not only Japanese soldiers, but civilian militias of potentially tens of millions of citizens ready to fight. And it would also involve the Soviet Union participating, which means if they won the war with the Soviets' help, they would have to split control and
mate, imagine Japan was split.
influence over Japan's empire after the war.
That would not be good.
Or, the second option was to use their new powerful bomb to swiftly end the war, with no more loss of American lives.
That's crazy to think. Like, I never really knew about that context of the USSR also getting involved. The same thing that happened with Korea would have happened with Japan. So you think about it like that, as crazy as it is, and I know I've said this before, like, about how in school we used to have, like in class we'd talk about the Hiroshima bomb in Okazaki. What was it? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nagasaki. If it was like the best thing to do. When you think about all these things, it is like as crazy as that sounds. I mean, just the loss of life on the island alone, 100,000 Japanese and 12,000 US soldiers. That happens throughout Japan. There's more people losing their lives. It's crazy to think, but I guess that's pure devastation. It's just like, you know what, that happens there, and then the country surrenders, and no more lives are lost. You know, it must have been such a crazy decision to make, like, such a difficult decision to make. But again, imagine a world with a split Japan and all that stuff, all the problems that would cause. Like, yeah.
And much less Soviet influence in post-war Japan. They could do it on their own while also sending a message to the Soviets that they were the most powerful. On August 6, 1945, they chose the second plan. They dropped this unfathomably powerful bomb on the city of Hiroshima, releasing a hellfire the world had never seen, and killing 140,000 people, almost all of them civilians, forever altering the course of history. 2 days later, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and began rapidly taking their territory. When Japan still doesn't surrender, the US drops another bomb. This one...
Wow, so the USSR were like, they're not going to surrender, let's just get involved now. So obviously this is what caused them to surrender. Flipping hell, if they didn't surrender sooner, then the world, again, would have been so different, especially in this region.
On the city of Nagasaki. The Soviets continue to rapidly take territory, and it's more clear than ever that it is over for Japan. While some factions of the Japanese army still don't want to surrender, the emperor goes around them and tells the nation that it's over. Japan is unconditionally surrendering. The Americans moved in, took away Japan's powerful military, prosecuted the war criminals, and sent tens of thousands of troops to the vital island of Okinawa, where the US stayed as the occupying power until the 1970s, and where they still have tens of thousands of troops that serve American interests in Asia, while also being Japan's main source of security. The memory of this war is still in the minds of the people here, especially for those in the cities that were bombed and the southern islands that were invaded. And as this region becomes tense again, Japan is now expanding its military once again, mostly down here on these vital islands. I traveled here to see what that looks like and to talk to the people about what this feels like, what they're worried about. And I'll be sharing that story in an upcoming video.
Pray that peace.
That'll be fascinating, to be fair. There we go. And then here are the comments about better help, which is fair enough, because I mean, if it is a sketchy company, then people have all the right to say that. Maybe Japan would have won if they had better help. Flipping out. But yeah, this I guess is just another look into it. To be fair, I never really I don't think I've really heard the Soviet sort of side, and I guess sort of some, I guess you could say, influence in this, Pearl Harbor, etc. Or sorry, the bombings and all that, and just all of it really. Because I mean, again, in another universe, North Japan and South Japan's the thing, and that would not be good. Like, that would just be basically what happened to Korea. I just assume on a worse scale because there's more people, etc. But yeah, that's that. Let me know your thoughts on this, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.